Washington County residents are making renewed demands for action and answers from officials on injection wells after meeting with Ohio regulators last week. Our Chase Campbell has more on the meeting and how Washington County advocates are responding.
Leaders with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources met last week with a coalition of local advocates and Washington County residents, including a Marietta College petroleum geologist and members of the environmental groups Buckeye Environmental Network and Washington County for Safe Drinking Water. The meeting came after the state asked injection well operators to voluntarily pause operations at 4 wells in Washington County last month. Injection wells, drilled to store fracking wastewater or brine, have become a growing concern among Washington County residents who worry about the toxic brine migrating underground into local oil and gas wells or drinking water sources. According to the coalition that attended the meeting with ODNR, they left with little reassurance that state regulators are doing everything they can to prevent that migration. Jessica Archer, a volunteer with Washington County for Safe Drinking Water, says voluntary shutdown isn't enough. They're calling for formal chief suspension orders from the ODNR, saying a voluntary pause doesn't come with any legal deadline or enforcement power.
With the chief suspension order, the companies would have 120 days to develop a plan, and if that doesn't happen, then the wells have to be capped. And right now, we're just kind of in no man's land.
ODNR officials pushed back on the notion that they haven't done enough to address the issue during their meeting. Oil and Gas Resource Management Chief Eric Vandell said they felt a suspension order was unnecessary because the operators shut down their wells voluntarily.
We feel that the water was out of the injection zone, and we spoke to the operators about it, and they voluntarily shut down. Which is what the suspension orders would do.
ODNR is also hiring a contractor to test private water wells within half a mile of the paused injection wells, as Director Mary Mertz noted.
Even though we don't have any reason to think it has gone there, we're going to go out and do that testing and confirm whether it has impacted them or not.
Archer says only testing within half a mile doesn't go far enough, and noted that ODNR's plan only includes testing of domestic wells, not any city water sources. She says Washington County for Safe Drinking Water is planning to organize its own study with support from independent experts.
We have Dr. Jeffries, who's a petroleum geologist at Marietta College, who is on board with us. We have several chemists, several lab analysts. We actually have hydrogeologists and geologists calling us from around the state and even further that want to be involved.
Advocates also continue to call for a 3-year moratorium on injection wells, a demand that's been formalized in resolutions passed by the city of Marietta and numerous other public water utilities in Washington County. WTAP has requested comment from ODNR on this story, but hasn't received a statement from the agency as of Tuesday evening. In Marietta, Chase Campbell, WTAP News.